My wife thought I was falling apart. She was wrong about that, but I needed her to believe it, at least for a little while. Because the only way to find out who someone really is, who they really are when the lights go dim and the pressure comes on, is to give them a moment they didn't see coming, and then watch what they do with it. I watched, and what I saw changed everything. My name is Benjamin King. I'm 42 years old. I've lived in Greenpoint, Brooklyn my whole adult life. I work in logistics, senior vice president of operations at a firm called Hartfield & Crane, one of the better mid-market firms in Manhattan, the kind of place that's been around long enough to know what it's doing. I've been with them for 15 years. 15 years of early mornings, late nights, missed dinners, and canceled plans. 15 years of building something slowly and carefully the way my father taught me to build things. One brick at a time, no shortcuts. I bought my brownstone on Eckford Street back in 2016. 3 floors, original hardwood, a back garden that doesn't get enough sun but I've never minded. I bought it alone, before I was married, with money I'd been saving since my late 20s. It was mine. My mortgage, my name on the title, my Saturday afternoons on my hands and knees relaying tile. That house was the thing I was most proud of in my life. More than the job, more than the salary, more than any title I'd ever been handed. I met Nadine in the spring of 2013. She was working in marketing then. Not yet at Brentwood & Cole, but at a smaller firm up in Midtown. We were introduced through mutual friends at a rooftop party in Long Island City, and she was the kind of woman who makes you forget what you were talking about before she walked in. Sharp, witty, driven in a way I found genuinely attractive. We were together 2 years before I knew for certain I wanted to marry her, and another year after that before I asked. We got married in the fall of 2018 at a venue in the Navy Yard. Nothing over the top, just the people we actually cared about, good food, real music, and a dance floor that didn't empty until midnight. For the first several years, it was good. We were a team. We worked hard. We saved. We built a life together inside that brownstone that felt like ours even though the deed said my name only. Nadine contributed to the household. She paid into our joint account. We split costs fairly. I handled the mortgage separately. That was always my thing. But everything else, groceries, utilities, the renovation bills, the insurance, we handled together. Then, somewhere around the end of 2023, something started to change. I couldn't have told you exactly what it was at first. It wasn't one big thing. It never is, in my experience. It was smaller than that, the particular kind of shift that you notice in your gut before you notice it in your mind. The way she started taking phone calls in the hallway instead of on the couch. The way her evenings got just slightly less accountable. The way she'd be busy with something on her phone when I walked into a room, and the screen would go dark before I got close enough to see anything. The way her answers to certain questions, simple questions, reasonable questions, started arriving about a half second later than they used to. I've been in operations my whole career. Pattern recognition is not something I have to work at. It's just how my brain was built. And the pattern I was clocking in my own home, in my own marriage, was not one I wanted to be clocking. I told myself to slow down, to not jump to conclusions. People get distant. Marriages go through seasons. Work stress does real things to real people, and Nadine had been under a lot of pressure at Brentwood & Cole. I reminded myself of all the years we'd had without any of this. I told myself to trust what I knew. But here's the thing about that. There's a version of trust that's genuine, where you look at the evidence in front of you and reach a conclusion based on what you actually know. And then there's the other kind, the kind where you choose not to look at the evidence at all because what it might show you is something you're not ready to face. I was doing the second kind, and somewhere deep down I knew it. The evening that finally cracked it open for me happened in mid-December of 2024. Nadine and I had plans to meet for dinner at Lula's Kitchen on Franklin Street, an Italian place we'd been going to for years. The kind of spot where the owner's wife greets you by name and the bread comes out without being asked. We'd been going there since we were dating, and it had always felt like ours. She texted me around 7 in the evening to say she was running about 45 minutes behind. A client meeting had run long. I told her no problem, ordered a glass of wine and the bread, and settled in to wait. She arrived almost 2 hours after we were supposed to meet. I watched her come through the door, same work clothes she'd had on when she left that morning, but her hair was different, freshly blown out, the way she does it when she's somewhere she wants to look good. She hugged me, kissed my cheek, said the meeting was an absolute disaster and she was so sorry she'd lost track of time. The client was impossible. She was breezy, relaxed, the kind of calm that comes from having already decided exactly what you're going to say before you get there. I looked at her and smiled and said it was no problem. It was a problem. I didn't say that. I just sat across from her and asked about her week and split the pasta with her, and walked her home through the cold December streets, with my hand at the small of her back, like everything was exactly the same as it always had been. But something had settled in my chest that night. Something quiet and cold. Not anger, I wasn't angry yet. More like the feeling you get when you're looking at a set of numbers and they don't quite add up, and you know you're going to have to sit down eventually and find out where the error is. I started paying closer attention after that. Careful attention, the kind that doesn't announce itself. I started noticing the timing of her calls. I started keeping track of the evenings that were unaccounted for. I pulled our shared phone plan statements. I wasn't reading her messages. Nothing like that, just the call logs. And I noticed a number that showed up repeatedly. A number I didn't recognize. Sometimes late in the day. Sometimes in the evening. Not every day, but consistently enough to mean something. And then, in mid-January, I heard a name. We were in the living room one Sunday afternoon. She was on the couch. I was across the room doing something on my laptop and she was on a call. She clearly thought I couldn't hear or wasn't paying attention, and she said in a tone of voice I hadn't heard her use in quite some time, warm, almost playful, "Tell Derek I'll handle it." She glanced up, caught my eye, and the warmth evaporated. Later, when I mentioned it casually, just the name, just dropped it into conversation, she said Derek was a new hire at Brentwood & Cole, a media buyer. Young guy? Good at his job, nothing to it. Maybe. The weeks that followed were some of the longest I've spent inside a marriage. I went to work. I came home. I sat across from Nadine at dinner and talked about her day and the news, and the neighbors and whether we should finally fix the dryer that had been making that noise since November. I was present. I was civil. I was, I think, very good at appearing completely fine while internally I was running a constant background process that I couldn't turn off. I want to be honest with you about something. I hadn't decided to leave. I wasn't in that place yet. What I was doing was watching and waiting and hoping that whatever my gut was telling me would turn out to be wrong. Because the alternative, the thing I would have to do if it turned out to be right, was not something I was eager to face. 12 years together. 9 years married. A home we'd built together. You don't dismantle that without first making absolutely certain you understand what you're looking at. And then, on a Thursday morning in early March of 2025, I got the best news of my professional life. My director, Carol Hutchins, called me into her office on the 4th floor of our building on West 34th Street. Carol was the kind of executive who never wasted words. She'd been in logistics for 30 years and had the particular economy of language that comes from spending decades in rooms where time is money. She told me the board had approved the SVP restructuring, that the senior vice president of operations role was mine, effective the 1st of April, base salary of $185,000, plus performance bonuses tied to quarterly targets. I thanked her. I shook her hand. I walked out of her office and stood in the hallway for a moment outside her door, and for about 10 seconds I just felt the weight of 15 years of work sitting in my chest like something warm. Then I got on the elevator to go back to my floor, and somewhere between the 4th floor and the 2nd, a different thought came in. What is she going to do when I tell her? Not what is she going to do. I'd been watching Nadine for 3 months by then. I knew what her performed reactions looked like. I knew the difference between her real face and the one she put on when she'd already decided what this moment was going to be. And I realized, standing in that elevator, that I didn't actually know what she would do when she found out something significant had changed for me. I knew what I hoped she would do. But hope and knowledge are not the same thing. And that's when it occurred to me. Simple. Clean. What if she thought things had gotten worse instead of better? I'm not a man who plays games. That's not who I am. But I am a man who understands that if you want to know the real answer to a question, sometimes you have to ask it a different way than the obvious way. And the question I needed answered, more than any other question in my life at that moment, was this. When I'm at my lowest point, what does my wife do? I rode the Q train home that evening. I walked up Eckford Street in the early March cold. I went through our front door, hung my coat on the hook by the entrance, and walked into the kitchen. Nadine was at the counter with her phone. She glanced up when I came in and said, "Hey." I said, "Hey," back. She put the phone face down on the counter. That little reflex she developed, face down, always face down, and asked how my day was. I sat down at the kitchen table and I said, as evenly as I could manage it, "Actually, it wasn't great. Carol called me in this morning. Budget restructuring. They're eliminating my position." The room went still. Nadine looked at me. I looked back. I watched her face the way a man watches a road when he's not sure what's on the other side of the curve. "Wait," she said. "What?" "They let me go. Effective end of the month." She came around the counter, sat across from me at the table, and for about 6 seconds I counted because I was paying very close attention. Her face was genuinely shocked, soft, concerned. The face of someone who wasn't expecting this. 6 seconds. Then it shifted. Not dramatically, just a kind of settling, the way a face settles when the mind has caught up to the situation and started calculating. "What did they say exactly?" She leaned forward on her elbows. "Is there a severance package? Did they give you any reason?" "They mentioned a package. Standard," they said. "Standard for your level? You've been there 15 years, Benjamin." "I know. So that should be significant." She nodded slowly. "Is this just you or a broader round of cuts?" "Just me, as far as I know." She stood, went back to the counter, picked up her phone. "Let me tell you what she didn't do. She didn't come around the table and put her arms around me. She didn't say anything that started with we, not we'll figure this out or we'll be okay, or even just we. She didn't ask how I was feeling, or whether I was okay, or what I needed from her in that moment. She stood there with her phone in her hand and told me in a very reasonable voice that I should reach out to my contacts, that people at my level don't stay unemployed long, that I had a strong network and I should use it. She said it like she was reading from a checklist. Practical, efficient, somewhere very far away from the way a person who loves you responds when your world just fell apart. I nodded, said I was tired, and went upstairs. I sat on the edge of our bed in the dark for a long time. 9 years of marriage. That's what we've built. I hadn't been looking for a reason to walk away. I want to be clear about that. I'd been looking desperately for a reason to stay. I wanted her to fail this test. I wanted to sit across that kitchen table and have her look at me with her real face and say something that reminded me who she was when she was being fully herself. Something that cost her. Something real. She didn't do that. She did the math on my severance package, and I didn't know yet. Sitting there on the edge of that bed in the dark, that what she'd shown me in that kitchen was barely the beginning. I didn't know that the next day, in that same house, I was going to overhear something that would take everything I thought I understood about my marriage and turn it completely upside down. But we'll get there. That night, Nadine made dinner like nothing had happened. Lamb chops, my favorite. I sat at the dining room table while the news played in the background and she talked about a campaign her team was pitching the following week, and her friend Stacy's complicated situation with her husband, and whether the back garden needed to be reseeded in the spring. Normal. All of it so aggressively, deliberately normal. Like she'd decided the job thing was processed and filed and we were moving on. I ate the lamb chops. I made the right noises at the right moments. I asked about Stacy and the campaign, and I watched her. When she went to take a bath that night, I sat downstairs and thought about the last 3 months, about December, about the phone always face down, about Derek, about the way she'd looked at me when I told her I'd lost my job, that 6-second flash of genuine surprise before the calculator started running. And I thought about what I actually knew versus what I was still guessing at. And I decided I needed to stop guessing. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with. She came to bed a little after 10. Kissed me on the cheek, quick, dry, and was asleep in minutes. I lay next to her with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, running through everything I knew and everything I didn't. I didn't sleep until well after 2 in the morning. And even then it wasn't real sleep. It was just the body shutting down because it had no other option. And then morning came. Now, I need to tell you a couple of things before I tell you what happened next, because context matters here. The facts underneath this story are load-bearing, and you need to understand them to understand what I heard that next afternoon and why it hit me the way it did. The first thing is about the house. The brownstone on Eckford Street was mine alone. I bought it in 2016, 2 years before Nadine and I got married. It was in my name only, on the deed, on the mortgage, on everything. When we got married in 2018, Nadine moved in. Her name was never added to the title. Not because it was ever a point of contention, but because it was my asset, and we both understood that. She contributed to household expenses. She paid into our joint account, but the mortgage came out of my personal account. Always. And every major repair and renovation cost that I'd paid for over the years. The HVAC system, the roof work, the full kitchen renovation we did in 2023 was either fully or primarily mine. The second thing is about Nadine's mother, Roberta Voss, 67 years old, lived in a co-op in Flushing, Queens. I had been married to her daughter for 7 years, and I could count on one hand the number of times Roberta had said something to me that felt like it came without a side of arithmetic. She was civil. She was never openly rude, but there was something in the way she looked at me, a particular kind of measuring look that I'd noticed from the very beginning and never quite been able to shake, that always made me feel like I was being evaluated rather than welcomed. Nadine talked to Roberta almost every day. In hindsight, I probably should have sat with that information more carefully than I did. The next morning, Nadine left for work at her usual time. She kissed me goodbye at the door, that same quick, dry press of lips she'd been giving me for months, and said she hoped I'd get some good conversations going with my contacts. I told her I would. She left. I locked the door. I had taken the day off. I had plenty of personal time banked, and I genuinely couldn't sit in an office and pretend everything was normal. What I did instead, and this was not something I'd planned in any detailed way, it was just the instinct of a man who works in operations and knows that information is your most valuable resource, was go into the second bedroom and pull out the folder I'd been quietly building for the past couple of months. I'd been keeping records, bank statements from our joint account, the phone plan logs, notes I'd made to myself about specific evenings and specific patterns. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal. Just the careful documentation of a man who had learned in 15 years of business that you don't walk into a negotiation without knowing exactly what the numbers say. I spent the morning going through everything. I made notes. I organized by date. I thought about what I actually wanted and what my options were. And then, around 20 minutes to 1 in the afternoon, I heard the front door open. I went completely still. Nadine wasn't due back before 6:30 at the earliest. I'd watched her leave myself. I hadn't heard from her since. I stayed exactly where I was and listened. 2 sets of footsteps. The particular double rhythm of 2 people coming through a door together, not one. And then from the hallway 2 floors below me, I heard a voice that made my chest go cold. Roberta. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. I did not move. I sat in that chair in the second bedroom with the door open about 4 inches, and I did not move a single muscle. Old Brooklyn brownstones carry sound in a particular way. The walls are plaster, the ceilings are high, and voices travel through the floors like water through paper. I've known this about my house for 9 years. I've never been more grateful for it than I was in that moment. I heard them go into the kitchen, the refrigerator opened, the kettle went on, 2 chairs scraped across the tile floor, then the sound of 2 women settling in at my kitchen table in the middle of a Thursday afternoon like they owned the place. And then Roberta said it. So, how'd he take it? Just that. Simple. Like she'd been waiting all morning for the answer. Nadine was quiet for a moment. Then, about how I expected, he went quiet, kind of shut down. You know how he is. He internalizes everything. He went upstairs and just sat with it. He didn't get upset? No argument. No, that's not Benjamin. He doesn't explode. He goes inside himself and processes it alone. Which honestly, a small pause. That's good, actually. Emotional would have been harder to manage. Harder to manage. I want you to hear that. Not harder to deal with. Not harder to manage. Like I was a situation to be contained rather than a husband who had just come home and told her the worst professional news of his life. I sat very still and let that land. Good, Roberta said. The kettle clicked off. I heard the sound of it being poured. So what's next? Nadine said, I think the timing actually couldn't be better. He's going to be off balance right now. He's not going to want confrontation. He's not going to want complications. This is the window. And Derek? You're still certain about Derek? Derek is not a complication. He knows exactly what this is. I had heard that name in my own living room in January. I had heard my wife explain it away as a coworker, a new hire, nothing. I had decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. I had talked myself down from the ledge more than once. I was done doing that. And the house? Roberta asked. Her voice was comfortable, unhurried. The voice of someone who'd been thinking about this for quite some time. Nadine answered immediately, like she'd had this speech ready for a while. That's the part I have to handle carefully. His name is on the title alone. I checked again last month. That's the challenge. But I spoke to a family law attorney over on Madison Avenue a couple of weeks ago, and she said my position is actually stronger than I thought. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of financial contribution to the household. New York is an equitable distribution state. That matters. I heard Roberta make a sound, somewhere between a breath and a laugh. I told you the day you married him you should have pushed to be on that deed. I know you did. Ambition without leverage is just energy, Nadine. Silence. What about his finances? Roberta continued. The savings? He keeps his business accounts completely separate. Always has. He's private about money in a way that used to frustrate me. But honestly, right now I think it's going to work in a strange way. He's not going to be transparent about those accounts during a settlement, which means the joint account is what we're working with. And I've been building that steadily for 2 years. I have records. And you think he'll negotiate quietly? He won't want ugliness. That's not who Benjamin is. He'll want it resolved cleanly. And if he believes he's in a weakened position, which he does right now because he thinks he's unemployed, he's going to be more willing to settle fast and settle low. I heard every word of that sentence. I heard it clearly, and I let it settle into me the way cold water settles, slowly, completely, reaching every corner. She was going to use the thing she believed was my weakest moment as leverage in a legal fight over my house. She had planned it. She had an attorney. She had records. She had a timeline. She had talked through all of it with her mother. And she had done every bit of this while sleeping in our bed and eating dinner across from me and kissing me goodbye at the door every morning. Roberta said, What about his brother? The one in Philadelphia? William. He and Benjamin are close, but William doesn't get involved in other people's business. Benjamin would never ask him for that kind of help anyway. He's too proud. Too proud. She had me mapped. She thought she knew exactly how I would respond, what I would do, and what I wouldn't do. And she had built her entire plan around those predictions. She had one problem. She was working with incomplete information. You know, Roberta said, somewhere in the comfortable middle of that conversation, I always liked Benjamin well enough. I just never thought he was quite enough for where you're going. Nadine said nothing for a long moment, then quietly, I know, Mom. I sat in that chair and I heard my mother-in-law tell my wife that I wasn't enough for her. And my wife didn't disagree, and the kettle was still warm in my kitchen, and they were both perfectly comfortable right there at my table. I did not move. Not yet. I waited until they shifted to the living room. Then I stood up very slowly, walked to the bathroom connected to the second bedroom, closed the door without making a sound, turned the cold tap on, and stood over the sink. I looked at my own face in the mirror. 42 years old, gray in the beard, a face that had looked back at me through 15 years of building things the hard way. She doesn't know I'm up here. She doesn't know I was promoted. She doesn't know I heard every single word. And right there, looking at myself in that mirror, I made the decision that would determine everything that came after. I was not going to react. I was not going to go downstairs and blow this up. Not today. Not yet. I was going to be calm. I was going to be organized. And I was going to protect what was mine with the same patience and precision I had used to build every single thing in my life worth having. Because whoever controls the information controls the outcome. I have known this since I was 25 years old, and right now, I had all of the information. She had none of it. I went back to the desk, opened my laptop, and sent one email. Not to an attorney, not to Nadine, to my brother William King, down in Philadelphia. Subject line, call me tonight. Don't mention this to anyone. Then I sat back down, folded my hands and listened to the sound of my wife and her mother in the living room below me, discussing whether the back garden needed new furniture. William called me at just past 9 that evening. By then, Roberta had been gone for a couple of hours. Nadine had come upstairs around 4:30 with a glass of water and what I recognized by now as her performance of concern, the tilted head, the careful eyes, the "how are you doing up here?" delivered in a tone that was calibrated to land exactly right. I told her I'd reached out to a few contacts and was waiting to hear back. She nodded and said she was proud of how I was handling it. I told her thank you. Then I went and sat in the back garden and waited for my brother to call. William is 39, 3 years younger than me. He's a civil engineer in Philadelphia, and he is without any question the most methodical thinker I have ever known. We don't talk every week. Life doesn't always allow for that. But when we do, there is never any wasted language between us. We cut straight to what matters. Always have. Talk to me, he said. So, I did. I told him everything. I started at December, with Lula's kitchen and the freshly done hair. I told him about the patterns I'd been tracking for 3 months. I told him about the name Derek and the phone always face down, and the call logs I'd been quietly reviewing. I told him about the promotion that morning. Yes, the promotion, the SVP role, $185,000. And then I told him about the fake firing I'd delivered at the kitchen table that evening, and what Nadine had done in response. And then I told him what I had heard from 2 floors above my own kitchen that afternoon. William was quiet for a long time when I finished, long enough that I checked the phone to see if the call had dropped. The house, he said finally. That's still in your name alone. Always has been. And she went to a family law attorney 2 weeks ago. That's what she told Roberta. Then she has been planning this significantly longer than 2 weeks. You don't consult a family law attorney without having already made a decision. That's not a preliminary conversation. That's strategy. A pause. You need legal counsel. Not Monday. Tomorrow. It's Friday. I know what day it is. I have someone in Manhattan. His name is Ted Halverson. He's been practicing real estate and family law for 30 years, and he owes me a professional favor I've never called in. I'm going to text him tonight. Don't be surprised if you have an appointment before noon tomorrow. I started to say something about the joint account, and he stopped me. Don't touch it. I know what you're thinking. Don't do it. You don't move a dollar without legal guidance, because if you move first and it looks reactive, she uses it. Let it sit exactly as it is until you've talked to Ted. She's been deliberately building that account. She said so. I know, and her deposits are documented, but so are yours. Your income into that account is on record too. A good attorney knows what to do with that. Just leave it alone for now. He paused. How are you holding up? I'm okay. A longer pause. Ben. It's me. I leaned back in the patio chair and looked up at the Brooklyn sky. That particular shade of dark that isn't really dark. The ambient glow of 10 million people surrounding you, close enough to feel but never quite close enough to see. It's strange, I said. I thought I would be angrier. I thought when I finally had the full picture I would feel something bigger. But I just feel very clear. Clear is better than angry, William said. Clear wins. I know. What do you actually want when this is over? What does the other side look like? I thought about it. I want my house. I want what I've built to stay built. I want to come out of this with what I put in. Not more, not less. Then that's what we're working toward. His voice was steady. I'll call Ted tonight. We stayed on the phone another half hour after that. William walked me through what he knew about New York equitable distribution law from when he'd gone through his own divorce 6 years back. He wasn't a lawyer, but he'd done his homework the painful way, and it showed. By the time I went back inside, I had a map of the territory in my head, and I knew where I needed to go. Nadine was on the couch when I came in, watching something on the television. She looked up and gave me that small, measured smile she'd been giving me all evening. Better? Getting there, I said. I sat down beside her. She reached over after a few minutes and put her hand on my knee. I put my hand over hers. We watched television for 45 minutes and I didn't absorb a single second of it. The next morning, before Nadine was even out of bed, William had texted me, Ted Halverson, 10 a.m. tomorrow, 47th between Lex and 3rd, 14th floor. He'll be expecting you. I told Nadine over breakfast that I was going to meet an old contact from my Hartfield days uptown, someone who might know of something in the pipeline. She said that was smart. She told me to eat before I left. Ted Halverson's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower on 47th Street, the kind of building that tells you immediately this is where serious money goes to sort out serious problems. Ted himself was 61, silver-haired, with the kind of stillness in him that you only find in people who have spent 30 years in rooms where very high stakes are being negotiated very quietly. He had the handshake of a man who has never once felt out of his depth. He did not ask small talk questions. He just looked at me across the desk and said, "Tell me what you're dealing with." So I told him. The house, purchased 2016. My name alone predating the 2018 marriage. The marriage, 7 years. Nadine's genuine financial contributions to joint household expenses throughout. The joint account. The mortgage paid entirely from my separate personal account since day one. The home repairs I had funded. The HVAC replacement back in 2021. The roof in 2022. The full kitchen renovation in 2023, for which Nadine had contributed about $4,500 out of the joint account, and I had covered the remaining $19,500 from mine. The promotion, as of the day before, senior vice president, base salary of $185,000. The fake firing I had delivered, what Nadine had done in response, and what I had heard through the floor of my second bedroom. Ted listened without a single interruption. He didn't write anything down while I was talking. He just listened with the complete, unhurried attention of someone who knew exactly what to do with information once he had all of it. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "First question," he said, "is divorce what you want? Because everything that comes after this depends on the honest answer." I looked at him. I went into yesterday thinking I was testing a marriage I wanted to save. By yesterday afternoon, I was listening to my wife and her mother talk through a legal strategy against me at my own kitchen table. I held his gaze. I want to protect what's mine, and I want to do it right. He nodded once. Then here's where you stand. He was methodical. He walked me through New York's equitable distribution framework the way a surgeon explains a procedure. Precisely, without drama, without unnecessary comfort. The brownstone was separate property as a baseline because I purchased it before the marriage, and it was titled solely in my name. Nadine's legal position would likely focus on two potential claims. 1. Her contributions to the household during the marriage could be argued as entitling her to credit. And 2. Any appreciation in the property's value during the marriage could become a point of negotiation. "Has she contributed to the mortgage at any point?" he asked. "Never. The mortgage has always come out of my separate account." He made a note. "That's significant. Document it thoroughly. Every payment, every statement. Going back to the beginning. I have them." Something in his expression settled. Not quite a smile, but close. "Good. Now the joint account." I told him what I'd overheard. Nadine's deliberate deposits over 2 years, her statement that she had records, her plan to use the account as a component of the settlement case. "She's correct that joint marital funds are subject to equitable distribution," Ted said. "But the calculation depends heavily on the proportion of contributions. If your deposits substantially exceed hers over the life of the account, that affects the math. Can you document your deposits going back?" "I've been downloading statements for 2 months. I can go back further." He nodded. "Here's what you do not do. You don't move any funds from that account. You don't close it. You don't change any beneficiaries anywhere on any account. You don't adjust life insurance designations. You don't touch anything that currently exists. Everything stays in place until I tell you otherwise. Any unilateral financial movement right now looks reactive, and reactive is the worst position to be in." I told him William had said the same thing. Smart brother. He clicked his pen. "Now?" Tell me about Derek. I told him what I knew. The name from January, the frequency on the phone logs, what I'd heard Nadine say to Roberta about him. That his name was Derek, and that Nadine had described their situation to her mother as one where he knew exactly what this is. Ted listened. Do you have documentation of communication between them? Call logs from our shared plan. I have a number I believe is his, based on frequency and timing of calls. No message content. All right. Infidelity in New York divorce proceedings is a complex area. It can affect certain financial considerations, but it's not the primary driver of equitable distribution. Don't confront him or her about this. Don't take any action in that direction without talking to me first. What you have is information, and information is most valuable when the other side doesn't know you have it. I understood that principle deeply. We talked for another 40 minutes. He would begin building the legal position. I would gather documentation, full mortgage history, bank records, credit card statements, renovation receipts, the complete paper trail of every financial contribution I had ever made to that brownstone. We would reconvene the following Thursday. Before I left, he asked, "Have you formally accepted the SVP promotion yet?" In writing, "I haven't sent the signed letter back yet. Accept it today. Email them your acceptance and ask them to confirm receipt. I want that on record. Officially, with a timestamp, before anything else moves." I accepted the promotion from the lobby of Ted's building on 47th Street, right there on my phone, before I even stepped outside. I sent it to Carol Hutchins' office email and got a response within 20 minutes. "Congratulations, Benjamin. Welcome to the SVP team. We're looking forward to April 1st. I stood on 47th Street in the cold, thin Manhattan sunshine, and for just a moment I let myself feel what that was. The promotion, the 15 years, the work. Then, I put my phone in my pocket and went home. That Saturday evening I cooked dinner. Pasta, something I hadn't done in a while, and Nadine looked genuinely surprised when she came into the kitchen and found me at the stove. "What's the occasion?" she said. "No occasion. Just felt like it." She sat at the counter and watched me cook, and we talked about her colleague's new place in Astoria, and a documentary she'd been meaning to watch, and whether the garden needed reseeding in the spring. Conversation that felt, on the surface, like any Saturday in any ordinary year of our marriage. I made the pasta. I poured 2 glasses of wine. I plated hers and set it in front of her. At one point she said, "I'm really glad you're not spiraling about the job thing. I know how much Hartfield means to you." Spiraling. I filed that word. "I'm working through it," I told her. "I know you are." She reached across the counter and touched my arm. "That's what I love about you, Benjamin. You're steady." Steady. She said it like it was a simple thing, like it was just a personality trait. She had no idea that the steadiness she was observing was not resignation or numbness or defeat. It was preparation. The days that followed were some of the strangest I have lived. I went back to the office on Monday, because I had never lost my job, and because the promotion was sitting in my email inbox confirmed and official, and because I was not going to let any of this derail 15 years of work. Every morning I left the brownstone and told Nadine I had meetings with contacts, informational interviews, calls with people from my network. She would nod and look at me with that brand of sympathetic support that I now understood completely. She thought she was managing me. And the thing that unsettled me most, more than the anger, more than the grief, more than the practical dread of what was coming, was how calm she was. A guilty person, a person who knows they are doing something wrong, has a certain quality of restlessness. Little tells. An over-explanation here, an overcorrection there. Some part of the body that knows even when the mind has decided to proceed anyway. Nadine was not restless. She was making dinner and doing laundry, and asking me how the search was going, with the ease of someone who had done their math and was comfortable with the answer. She thought I was going to be straightforward to handle. On a Wednesday evening, about a week after I'd overheard the kitchen conversation, I called William from the back garden. "Ted's team dug something up," William said. "On Derek Finch, 34 years old, media buyer at Brentwood & Cole. Started there last September. Single." A pause. I didn't dig deep. Just confirmed what we suspected. "How?" "LinkedIn, and a mutual contact who works in that building. I didn't ask anything direct, just confirmed the name lines up. I stood in the garden and looked at the Brooklyn sky. Okay, I said. How are you? Good. I'm good. He didn't push it. That's the thing about William. He doesn't need you to perform fine. He just listens to the actual answer. The following Thursday, I walked into Ted's office with a folder that would have made any organized man proud. Complete mortgage payment history dating back to the day I took out the loan in 2016. Bank statements from both the joint account and my separate accounts going back to the beginning of the marriage. A full accounting of the joint account deposits showing my contributions represented 71% of the account's total growth over the life of the marriage. Receipts and invoices for every significant home expenditure I had personally funded. The HVAC system in 2021 at $8,400. The roof repair in 2022 at $6,200. The 2023 kitchen renovation at a total of $24,000. Of which I had covered $19,500 from my personal account, and Nadine had contributed $4,500 from the joint. Ted went through each item with the same methodical attention he'd given my initial conversation. When he set the last document down, he looked up. This is solid work, he said. Your separate property position is well supported. Her attorney will still make arguments. That's what attorneys do. But the documentary foundation here is strong. Then he asked me the question I'd been waiting for. Have you accepted the promotion in writing? Yes. The Monday after our first meeting. Confirmation came back the same day. He allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Good. Here's what I want you to understand about where we are. She went to her attorney with one picture of your situation. An unemployed husband, one major asset. A wife with 7 years of documented contributions and strong knowledge of New York equitable distribution law. That was the hand she thought she was holding. He paused. When we respond, through formal legal channels, with full financial disclosure, she and her attorney are going to see a completely different picture. A senior vice president making $185,000 a year with 15 years of documented separate mortgage payments and a property acquisition that predates the marriage by 2 years. He leaned forward slightly. That moment is going to matter, and she is going to experience it through her attorney, not from you directly, which means she has no opportunity to prepare for it in advance. I nodded slowly. One more thing, Ted said. She told her mother she was planning to raise the conversation. The divorce, the separation, whatever she calls it, within 3 to 4 weeks of that Friday. That puts us in the window of the last week of March. When she brings it up, you listen. You say you need time to think. You do not tell her about the promotion, about the attorney, about any of this. You call me immediately. Can you do that? Yes. Then we're ready. I walked out of that building into the afternoon and thought, we are very ready. She chose a Friday evening to do it. I had counted the days since that kitchen conversation and marked the last week of March in my mind as the window she'd told Roberta she was targeting. So when I walked through the front door on a Friday evening toward the end of March, and she was standing in the living room with the television already off and a particular kind of careful stillness in her posture, I recognized what this was before she said a word. Hey, she said. Can we talk? Of course. I hung my coat on the hook. Let me get some water. I went to the kitchen slowly, filled a glass, took a breath that was visible to no one but me, walked back to the living room and sat in the armchair across from her. She had sat down on the couch, hands in her lap. Everything about her was arranged, the posture, the expression, the placement of herself in the room. She had prepared for this conversation, probably more than once. I've been doing a lot of thinking, she began, about us, about where we are. I said nothing. I think we've been moving in different directions for a while now. And I think we've both probably known that for longer than either of us has said out loud. She waited. I said, okay. She blinked. She had expected a different response. Some resistance. Some immediate emotional reaction to work against. She adjusted quickly. She was good at adjusting. But I caught the half-second recalibration. I think we should consider separating, she said. I think it would be better for both of us in the long run. What does separating look like to you? We'd each need our own space. I'd need to find somewhere, And we'd have to figure out the practical side of things. The house, the accounts, how to do that fairly. The house, right on schedule, right in the first paragraph, just like I knew it would be. What's your sense of what's fair with the house? I asked. She had prepared for this too. She set out her position carefully. 7 years of marriage, 7 years of financial contribution, her sense that she deserved to have those years recognized in any settlement. It was well organized, her attorney had done good work. When she finished, I said, "Have you spoken to anyone about this professionally?" A pause. "I've had some preliminary conversations, yes." "A family law attorney?" She looked at me more carefully. "Yes." "When did you do that?" "A few weeks ago." I nodded. "Then you should know that I have too." The room got very quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't comfortable for anyone. "When?" she said. "The morning after you and I talked about the job." That was the very next day. You couldn't have already been thinking about." "I wasn't," I said, "but I needed to understand what I was looking at. So I went and found out." She was still processing. "I've spent the last few weeks putting together documentation," I continued. "Mortgage history going back to 2016, bank statements, deposit records from the joint account, home improvement receipts, every dollar I've ever put into this property, tracked and sourced." Her hands had stopped moving in her lap. "Nadine." I held her gaze. "I've been in this house every day since that Friday." She understood immediately. I watched it move across her face, not a slow dawning but a fast collapse, like a building that holds for 1 second after the supports give and then goes all at once. The Friday I came home with, I heard everything. The silence that settled over the room after that was a different kind of silence than anything that had come before in this marriage. For me, it was familiar territory. I had been living inside this information for 3 weeks. I had organized around it, built a strategy around it, made my peace with parts of it that I was still making my peace with. For her, it was brand new ground and it was shifting under her feet. "Benjamin, you don't need to explain it to me. I'm not here to perform anger at you. I've had time to get past that. What I'm here to do is make sure this gets handled correctly and fairly." She opened her mouth, closed it. "Derek Finch," I said. "Media buyer. Started at Brentwood in September. 34 years old." She looked away toward the window. That was enough. "I'm not going to make this ugly," I said. "I want you to hear that and believe it, because I mean it. But I need you to understand something. I have legal counsel. I have documentation, and whatever your attorney's position looks like based on the information she had when you came to her, I need you to go back and have that conversation again, because the information has changed." She looked back at me. Her voice was careful. "What information?" I reached into my jacket pocket, took out the single folded piece of paper I had put there that morning, set it on the coffee table between us and slid it across. She picked it up, unfolded it. It was the offer letter from Hartfield and Crane. The letterhead, the title, Senior Vice President of Operations, the salary, $185,000 effective April 1st, 2025. She read it once. She read it again. When she looked up, her face had the particular quality of someone who has just discovered that the hand they spent 3 months building was built around a card that isn't in the deck. "You were promoted," she said, "on the same morning I came home and told you I'd been fired. You weren't fired. Never. Not for a day." She was very quiet. "You tested me. You were planning to use the appearance of my vulnerability as leverage in a legal case over my house." I kept my voice level. "No anger. No performance. We both had tests running. You failed yours first." She set the letter down on the coffee table. "How long have you known?" she said. "About everything. Since the Friday afternoon I spent in the second bedroom while you and your mother had your conversation in my kitchen. 3 weeks." She absorbed that. "And you went to work. You came home. You cooked dinner on Saturday. I was organized." I said, "That's all." The divorce took just over 4 months from start to finish. Her attorney, a capable woman named Priya Sate, whose office was exactly where Nadine had told Roberta it would be, on Madison Avenue, filed the initial claim based on what Nadine knew the day she walked through that office door: an unemployed husband. one major asset in his name, a wife with 7 years of documented household contributions and a solid understanding of how New York equitable distribution works. That picture was accurate as far as it went. The problem was how far it went. When Ted's response came back, with the full financial disclosure, the employment confirmation, the complete mortgage payment history, the deposit analysis from the joint account, the renovation receipts, Priya Sathe requested a 30-day extension to reassess her client's position. She got it. And then we negotiated. I want to be clear about what I asked for in that negotiation, because I think it matters. I wasn't trying to leave Nadine with nothing. 7 years of genuine household contributions are real, and I was not going to pretend otherwise. She had paid into our joint life faithfully for 7 years. That counts for something. What it doesn't count for is a claim on a property that I purchased 2 years before I ever married her, with money I spent a decade saving, and maintained entirely from my own income for the 9 years of our marriage. What Nadine received in the final settlement was fair. A structured cash payment calculated against her verified contributions to the household. A proportional share of the joint savings account based on documented deposits. Full credit for the $4,500 she had contributed to the 2023 kitchen renovation. What she did not receive was the house. The brownstone on Eckford Street remained exactly where it had always been, in my name, on my deed, carrying my mortgage. The last time I saw Roberta was in the hallway outside the mediator's conference room on a Tuesday afternoon in July. She was there with Nadine. She looked at me exactly the way she always had, that measuring look, calculating and assessing, trying to determine what something is worth. And I thought, standing in that hallway, about everything she had said at my kitchen table, about how I wasn't quite enough, about ambition without leverage being just energy, about the house. I thought, you miscalculated the asset, Roberta. The whole time you were looking at the property, you missed the man who built the foundation. I didn't say any of it. I held the door for them. Roberta walked through without meeting my eyes. Nadine stopped in the doorway for a moment and looked at me. Really looked at me, the first time in a long time she had done that. And then she walked through too. I let the door close behind them. I'll say a brief word about Derek Finch, because I know you're wondering. What I know is that by the fall of 2025, roughly 6 months after the divorce was filed, the situation between Nadine and Derek had already developed the kind of complications that tend to develop when something new is built on the rubble of something it helped destroy. I'm not going to go into detail, because honestly, I don't have much interest in the detail. What I'll say is this: people don't tend to be fundamentally different with the next person than they were with the last. That's not a judgment. That's just a pattern that holds. I bear the man no specific ill will. He intersected with my life briefly and at an angle. That chapter closed. Now it's September, early September 2025. 6 months since all of this started. I'm sitting in the back garden on Eckford Street on a Saturday morning, the patio chairs that Nadine and I never used enough. I use them now. I'm out here most Saturday mornings with coffee and the newspaper from the deli on Manhattan Avenue, because I still buy a physical paper like a man 20 years older than I am, and I am not going to apologize for it. The September light in Brooklyn has a particular quality that I've noticed every year I've lived here. It comes in at an angle. It's clean and clear and slightly golden, the way light gets when summer finally decides to let go, and something quieter moves in. I've always liked September for that, for the sense of things settling. The brownstone is mine. The SVP role went effective April 1st, as scheduled. The team at Hartfield is strong. The work is good. I'm going in every day with a clarity I haven't had in a couple of years, because the weight I was carrying without fully admitting I was carrying it is gone now, and I can feel the difference. I'm not going to tell you I've arrived somewhere perfectly sorted and whole. I'm 42 years old. There's plenty of road still ahead, and I have no idea what most of it looks like yet. What I know is this: I was complicit for too long in not looking at what was in front of me. I chose, for an extended period, the easier version of my own marriage over the true version. And that was on me as much as anyone. But when I finally looked, when I sat in that second bedroom chair and heard my own home being planned around me, I didn't panic, I didn't blow up, I didn't make a single move I couldn't justify. I organized. I documented. I found the right people. I waited, and I came out the other side with what I'd spent 15 years building. Intact. Here is what I know now that I want to leave you with. Being underestimated is not a weakness. In the right hands, it is the cleanest advantage available to you in any room. She thought she was using my low moment as a window to act against me. She was right that it was a window. She just never found out which side of the glass I was standing on until it was too late to change the outcome. You can build a long time. You can be patient a long time. You can work quietly and document carefully and stay steady when every instinct you have is telling you to react. And then, when the moment comes, and the moment always comes, you don't have to say very much. You just slide a piece of paper across a coffee table and let them do the math. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.